And good afternoon, everyone. Let's continue to discuss this paper, Corporate Finance and the Firm Pollution. And this is a conference paper I just mentioned in CICF. And this issue is quite interesting. So I picked this paper to discuss in the seminar. And there have some disadvantage of this paper, so everyone can improve by yourself in the future researchers. And first of all, the research questions is the paper actually examine whether the relationship between the firm toxin release and pollution intensity increase after issuing debt. And this is a very important angle. When a firm issuing much more debt, they have a much more pressure on repay the principal and the interest payment. So sometimes you have very limited capital inflow. So you might have to pay your debt first, rather than doing a lot of capital expenditure on reduce your pollution or toxin release. So this is a trade-off of the decision making for a corporate finance decision. So this is an important angle that can be explored much more. And this paper also examines whether this effect is stronger when firms have debt coming due. Maybe in 1 year, it's very, very close. So you have much more pressure to pay the principal and the interest payment, and also may have some loan covenants. The covenants is like a restriction. If you violate the covenants, you will be penalized by the bank. When your covenant is approaching or your debt is due, so you might have much more stronger pressure to pay debt rather than to increase your capital expenditure on reduce the pollution. So this is a very good angle, and many questions can be answered. And the paper find that really have a positive relationship between the debt issuing and the pollution increase. And the effect stronger when firms have debt due or loan covenant approaching violations, and many others reasons. Overall, I think this paper findings suggest that firms sacrifice environment to please their creditors, and the source is from financing can affecting the corporate environmental performances. The paper used the USA data, but the other country also doing the very similar researchers, and they also have the very, very consistent result about the debt insurance might affect the pollution investment. So let me ask you, if you prefer pay debt first, then the relationship between toxin release after issuing debt should be positive or negative. Pay debt first, then you pay your interest and the principal, and the relationship between the toxin release after issuing debt. The relationship in between should be positive or negative. 李持佑 positive. Yeah. If you pay pollution first, you think pollution reducing is more important. The priority is the first. Then the relationship between should be positive or negative. 李承彦 are you positive? You say positive? Okay. Then Chen Boyan, what's your idea? Negative. Why? For what reasons? Hmm? If pay debt is not your priority and pay pollution is your priority, so you might spend expenses on capital expenditure on reducing the toxin release. So the relationship in between might be negative, isn't it? So if you find a positive relationship in between, that means most of the firm pay that first. If you find the negative relationship in between, that may imply that most of the firm pay pollution first. This is the original direction that might be changing depending on how many factors you are including. So the model might be more complicated. So debt financing, actually, if we have two kind of debt, one is bank loan. Bank loan have bank monitoring, and beside that, what's the attributes about bank loan? You can say like the amount, the maturity, whether they are secure or their term, many others. Can anyone say something about the bank loan characteristic? Private debt. What's your idea about bank loan? With monitoring and beside that, any else? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And any others? Okay. Okay. Very good. So usually bank loan is smaller than bonds, and most of the bank loan need collateral to secure, and usually have covenants because bank have to restrict the risk. And beside that, the maturity might be shorter compared to bonds, and most expensive compared to bonds. Bonds usually using market rate plus the markup depending on the risk. So the market rate usually is lower than the banking interbank setting rate. So this is why bank loan is much more expensive compared to bonds, and also smaller amount and shortened maturity. So using bank loan is totally different from using bonds. So this is one type of debt. As far the other side is bonds. So compare with the bank loan without monitoring. So most of the bonds may have free rider problems. Everyone's saying that, oh, we have a JP Morgan here, we have a Bank American here, we have a Chase, we have the other institutional investor here. So we don't need to monitor it because everyone just take advantage of those big lenders. So free rider problems always there. But compared to the bank loan, it's much more cheaper and have longer maturity and a larger amount. And usually, if you have a very good rating, you don't need to secure with the borrowing. And usually, without governors on the contract, depending. Usually they don't need to because credit rating is like an A plus or B plus above. So if a firm, let me ask you this, prefer to reduce pollution, if you want to pay pollution first, which step would you pick? You will pick loan or you will pick bonds? Can anyone answer that? You prefer bank loan or public bonds? Xie Fangchao, are you there? Yeah. Which did you prefer? If you prefer to reduce pollution, you would choose bank loan first or public bonds first. Hello? Are you there, Xie Fangchao? Yeah, have you answered me? I did not hear your answer. What? I don't understand. I only need your answer is bank loan or public bonds. Bank loan. Any different answers? 张静文 public bonds. What? Okay. You prefer to pick public bonds because it's cheaper, it might have a longer maturity and may have minor monitoring, so you have less pressures, right? Okay. So usually two type of debt are different. Okay, so that choice is also very important, not just debt compared to equity. Even inside the debt ties might affect your pay pollution or pay debt first decision. So this is the angle of the paper. And to develop this paper, the author developed 3 hypotheses. And the first one, of course, is the quite important one. The main issue is from pollution. Is main pollution higher after issuing debt? You have to answer the hypothesis 1. And the second hypothesis, depending on the firms, whether they have repayment pressure, and you have to design which repayment pressure you might be approaching, like you have to almost violate your covenants or your debt dues in 1 month, in 1 year, so you have much more pressure compared to your counterparts. And hypothesis 3 is whether this impact is stronger when firms have less redeployable assets, like fixed assets. Okay, this is the third hypothesis. After examining 1, and then continue to examine the hypothesis 2 and 3. And the data from different database, debt issue from the LPC from the loan database, GSGIN, and the FISD is fixed income bonds. So this is a debt issuing from loan and bonds. Firm characteristic from CompuState. Firm pollution data from TRI. And the toxin chemical list contains 700 more. It's from TRI2. Final sample, the author collect 2,400, composes of 1,700 firms individually. The time period is from 1987 to 2018. So this is the whole sample, the paper employee. And we can see that the summary statistic from the sample. Here, this is a pollution data. So on average, the number of pollution plants is 6 plants. And each firm have 10 different types of polluting chemicals on average. In the total toxin release, this is the pounds. So your amounts, like your water and your other, you might have some toxin release and counted by millions pounds. Here is the numbers, very large. And there is abatement measures. Abatement measures means the toxin activity. How many plants you are doing detoxing activity of your plant? So each firms usually have 2.75. Also, everyone are making efforts on reducing the toxin. In the penalty measures here, we can see usually number of penalty is 1 on average. Median is 1, but on average is 2. A penalty amount in $1 million is 3. And the environmental penalty dummy, whether you already or happen to have been penalized, this is only 18% of the firm. This is the whole picture of the data. And the next one is the CompuState firm characteristic. Here, you can see that on here is the firm characteristic. And after the covenants, this is a loan contract attribute. So covenants, there have on average negative 1.92 covenant tightness. If you have more numbers, larger number of this, that's your covenant is strictly. And producing ratio and also have production level. And the number of employee is like a firm size. If you have a larger number of employee, that means you are a large firm. It's very similar to like total assets, different measures. Big assets is a larger firm, but larger number of employee also means larger firms. And you have debt insurance, yes, 42%, and the amount in billion dollars is also 0.46. So did you have some picture of the data? And here is interesting. So the author find that this is a dependent variable, right? So take a look means we can normalize the dependent variables without any unit. So if we have different unit, we can take a look. Every measures being standardized. So we can compare different size and different measurements because we don't care about the unit anymore. So when firm have debt issuance given a dummy 1, we can see this positively and significantly affect the toxin release, right? Column 1. And the amount is the same result. Larger amount of debt issuance, positive and significant affect the toxin release. So column 1 and 2 have the same results. Debt issuance, yes. Amount, yes, positively and significantly affect toxin release. As for the column 3, 4, and 5, we can see the same result, right? Positively and significantly affect the toxin release on-site and the polluting plants and polluting chemicals. Different dimension all being counted on columns 3 to 5. So most of the firm pay that first, positive relationship in between, after control the producing level and the revenue and so on. So there may have some endogeneity problem. So the paper using 2006 because this event might affect the compensation problems. So high compensation and low compensation might have different incentive on doing the job. And this is the first IV, the author's employee. To be honest, I don't like this one. So I have questions asking you because I don't like their IV. Like a panel A, they are using accounting rule to make sure that the results still there, right? Negative doesn't change, negative. And they're using the second IV, which is the Russian default. And when they multiply by Russian default, the result is still there. Negatively, significantly affect the toxin release, doesn't change, right? So the paper just using 2 IVs and to conclude that after using that, most of the firm will have toxin release increase. Okay, so this is a very strong conclusion in this paper. I also don't like the second IV too. I just mentioned that the first is accounting rule and the second one is the Russian default. Why I don't like this one? Because this is American data and the author using Russian default. It might affect it that the small firm doesn't easier to borrow from the bank. But this is a different event. Russia default might impact the other countries significantly than American firms. And also, I don't think that the first one is also acceptable accounting rule change. Because this might affect the compensation numbers. But actually, searching paying debt or paying pollution not directly affect by the accounting rule. So this is another concern that this might have some space to be improved. So this is the authors using two IV to conclude the endogeneity is not a big problem because the result doesn't change. And also the paper exempt the other like hypothesis 2, right? So the hypothesis 2 conclusion continue using amount, using dummy, using amount, using dummy. Here we can see that it doesn't change the results. And also issuing debt, issuing equity, whether they have different results. Yes, here we can say issuing debt positively, significantly impact the toxin release in column 1 and 3. However, in column 2, which is issuing equity, and the author find issuing equity doesn't have the impact. So if a firm issuing equity, they did not find any increase toxin release after this issuance. So shareholder doesn't have much pressure compared to creditors repayment to be met. So they have different results. And the other is leverage recapitalization. Here we can see that they also have some pressures. So the toxin release increased significantly as well. And as for the debt rating and pressure here, for low rating firm, much more pressure. For debt due within 1 year, much more pressure, right? So we can see the significance only happened on these firms. As for the governors, this is like a hypothesis 2. Here, if your governance strictness is higher, the positive relationship is much more stronger. So governors have also multiplied the stronger effect. So this paper have a very interesting story, but some minor comments I have given for the authors. The first comment is the debt type. You guys just mentioned that bank loan is different from public debt in maturity, in amounts, and in monitoring, and in covenants, and many more. So I do think that authors should separate the debt into bank loan and the public debt. The paper lack this information. So I just wondering if you are using public debt, that might be negative. It could be the negative results. If you're using bank loan, the positive relationship might be showing. So the author did not do further. That's the job that you can do next time. So this is the first comment that I have for this paper, because if you can separate this, it's a really, really interesting. And from my personal point of view, I think this is a very good paper, can be developed. But the important thing is you have to have a CompuState database, and you have to have a LPC long database merged into the CompuState, and you have to FISD database bonds to merge into CompuState too. You have to have a PRI pollution data into the CompuState. For main database can create a very, very interesting story for this paper. So this is a common one. If anyone else are interested in developing these papers, you can discuss with me. I also have much more interest in doing this. And the comment two is some control variables should be added, but in this paper, they did not control all of this. We usually have to control the size, R&D capital expenditure, right? If you did not control capital expenditure and you are doing like a toxin release, it's like made the result came from capital ratio, R&D ratio, and came from profitability. If you did not control all of you cannot rule out the result may came from this, right? So I have to control these variables, and then we can rule out that the impact is not come from here because we already included all of this into the model. Okay, so this is quite important. The author doesn't do that. And optional, if you have institutional 13F data, you can include it too. So the comment three is parallel trend. I also mentioned this in the last presenting, right? Yeah, we have the first paper. And the parallel trends means after the event. If this is the event day, we have to have the parallel trend before the event, true group, control group, and treatment group. And we have to see they are in difference. And after the treatment, after the event, after the shock, and the control group continue to have the same slope. However, the other group, treatment group, might change in their slope. So there have some difference after the shock. But this paper doesn't have this graphing. So you have to add it a parallel trend and the shock and the aftershock trend to convince readers that the treatment is quite significant. Even though this is Russia event, this is the accounting rule, but without this parallel trend, you cannot conclude so strong. You cannot. So this is the comment three I have, and the comment four is this variable should be controlled in the equation. The equation only control like a yes or no, dummy, right? Issuing debt, yes, and given dummy 1. And issuing equity, yes, and issuing equity or debt was given a dummy variable. It also only control the amounts of the debt in total, but the other control variable should be added too, like a maturity, the long-term debt or short-term debt, and whether the debt have secure or collateral, or the debt have covenants or performance pricing restriction. All of this should be controlled in the contract because we don't want to have any exception that the result may come from maturity because we already control that. So we have to control all of this contract details into the models that we can control the results more significantly and strongly. So the common six is endogeneity concern. I think one group already mentioned this too. So this have a very high possibility that the inverse causality could happen. So that cause toxin release, or toxin release cause depth change. So there is a possibility that fern already had the toxin release is more likely to borrow depth. So this is not that affect the toxin release. It might have the reverse relationship, that because your toxin release is so high, so it's only the possibility for the firms to borrow from the debt rather than the equity, or borrow from the loan rather than the bondholders, because the bondholders, you do not have the very good credit or rating. It's very hard for this firm to issue debt in public. You can only borrow the debt from the bank in private. So some relationship might be inverse. So the paper doesn't check this point. So I think the paper need more check to address the endogeneity problem. And also the sector's fixed effect can be controlled in the models. We can see that the paper only control firm fixed effect, year fixed effect, without controlling sector fixed effect. Because some sectors are brown sectors, they are polluted sectors. Some sectors are greens. So without control the sectors, the result may come from the sector impact only. So we have to control all of this into the model. And again, when I see that the R-square explanation is so high, like a 81, like a 69, yeah, this is interesting. When I see the highly explanation power, I have a lot of doubts on the model, because the model doesn't control so completely, and the explanation power is so strong. Also, sometimes we have to reconsider if the explanation power is extremely strong. It may come from the highly collinearity or the other factors that dominate the results. So we have to think deeply again. And the conclusion here in this paper, so we have 4 group, right? Okay, so conclusion. Each group mention 1 point. Group number 1, first. We conclude 4, and I would like to go. Each group conclude 1 point that you learn today from the paper. Group number 1. Hello? Yeah. Can you say it again? No. Conclusion, not yet. Say 1 point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If the firm paid that first, then we will find that the relationship between the debt issuance and the pollution or the toxin release is positive. If you pay debt first, the relationship in between is positive, or otherwise it should be negative. This is a hypothesis one. Okay, group number two, conclusion. Say 1 point. What did the last sentence? What do you say? The last sentence? Yeah. So the paper only examined the debt issuance without separating the debt into public debt or private bank loan. So it's better that the author can do much more to separate the debt into bonds and the bank loans to explore more, because these two types of debt have different attributes on affecting uh, the toxin release or pollution intensity. Okay, nice. And group number three. Are you there? Low credit rate. Well, say it again. Mm-hmm. Well, the second one you mentioned is what? The first one is a rating, right? Low rating. And the second one you mentioned is what? Low rating. And the other is this one or not? Intensity. You mentioned this one, panel B. Okay, so when a firm have a low rating or a firm have debt due within 1 year, it's almost approaching to have much more pressures. And we can see the positive relationship in between is getting stronger. Okay, so low rating firms or they have much pressure to pay the interest payment and the principal. They might be able to increase the pollution release significantly. The impact is much more stronger because they have debt pressures due. Okay, and then group number four. Yeah, you say that the endogeneity problem after control of this, the results still show uh, the positive relationship in between. Is that right? But the endogeneity problem, the endogeneity doesn't mean the control variables. These are different one. Um, I mentioned it again. Endogeneity problem is very complicated. We cannot explain in this hours completely, but keep it in mind. You will see this word every turn, every seminar, every hours in our class. So you will finally understand what is the endogeneity concerns. But endogeneity concern doesn't mean we control much more variables in the model or we do something uh, uh, characteristic. You control all of it. You still have some endogeneity problem because this is a different dimensions. So endogeneity problem came from something external shock impact the relationship in between X and Y. So the external shock have to be considered into the model. But the model, the endogeneity concerns, this factor only affect the X rather than the Y. If it affect the Y, we can conclude it in X2, X3, but it doesn't. So endogeneity problem is the one factor that might affect X rather than Y. But what are they? So you have to find. So this is a important dimension that we need to take a quick look at the endogeneity concern in the papers in graduate school. It doesn't means control variables, but it's very good. We have full conclusions too. So the relationship between the depth issuance and pollution intensity could be increasing after issuing depth. So the result prevailing that after endogeneity concern, the result is still there. But I just mentioned that because the author used 2 IV, this might not be the best event or shock. And the other control, like a tightening depth governors, will making the relationship between much more stronger. And the governance of the public per environmental attitude also play a moderating role in ameliorating these events. There have some power from the government, from the community, or from the institutional investor that can be controlled. All of this can enhance, also can mitigate this event and the effect. So this is another conclusion from the paper. So think about what you can do next and think about what you can do next to develop your proposal in this semester. So very good. Thank you very much. We have this paper ready and discussing the comments and disadvantage and the outline of the essential of this paper. And I hope you enjoy the paper and to thinking of your interest in the future to develop yours. So our class will end here, and I hope you have a nice weekdays this weekend. We'll see you next week.